Okay.
Don't listen to me says.
Yep, it'll take a second to get audios right, but
smiling at least I hope.
Jess says.
Then I can give faces for realsies British Angie.
no
Don't listen to
Angie
me
face.
says.
And punchies for
Okay,
reals.
let me get this out of the way first. Without the A. So it's similar to John, but it's more like Joan.
Yeah.
Thank you. There we go. There he is.
Jess says.
Right, lol.
Now,
Translated
look,
from Estonian.
it is apparently, not apparently, I slept in and Jess is reading me the riot act. So, rightfully so, but I don't know how good of an idea keeping TTS on for the for the interview may be, but we're gonna try it. All right.
Roll with the punches.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't listen to me says.
He the man. Oh man, I like full stack live already more than
Yep.
yesterday.
Yep. I agree. All right. I'm going to do a quick intro and then we're just going to get into it. I do need to pause TTS for a second. Hello and welcome back to USBR Guest Cybersecurity Tips. I'm Theo, here to help you break down cybersecurity news and hacks and how they affect you. However, today, again, I'm interviewing the MonoSpace Mentor, CEO and CTO of their own managed web hosting business. We recorded the interview in an open Discord voice channel with video while monitoring chat with text-to-speech developed by Security Live. The MonoSpace Mentor has a wealth of experience that I will attempt to draw on from early beginnings, growth, and accomplishment. I'm very excited to talk to him. I also, I send people, I interview a list of questions to answer, and the MonoSpace Mentor did that, offering well-thought and candid answers. Find the document linked on the episode page on my GitHub. This may be a little bit longer than my normal format, so feel free to speed it up. Thank you for listening and enjoy. Joan, thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview. Actually, the first thing I want to ask you is behind you. You've talked about like the things that you have behind you, and I see keyboards. If you've ever mentioned it, I've missed it. What's in the bottom left corner with the blinking lights there?
First of all, thanks for having me, Brad. It's a great opportunity, and I love your stream, and happy to be here. Yeah, so the thing that's here right beside me is a PyDP-11. The PDP-11 was a mini computer in the 1970s, and Unix was actually invented on one of these PDP-11 mini computers. Back then, they had the size of at least a huge cabinet, if not a whole wall of a room. Now, this one is a little bit smaller because it's just a replica.
Okay.
As the name implies, it's powered by a Raspberry Pi. But this Raspberry Pi runs SimH, a software that simulates historic operating systems. So I can actually run research Unix from 1975 on that machine and try things out as they were back then.
Wow. Very cool. Okay. And you have other keyboards and things behind you too, and books, I imagine. Is there anything else that you want to mention back there?
Well, yeah, I have a slight addiction to collecting mechanical keyboards. I love keyboards that really feel right. And since this is the thing that I interact with at least 8 hours a day, I prefer having very good quality keyboards. And all of these keyboards, with a few exceptions, I built myself.
He is a little quiet, sir.
Via
Jess
some custom group buys
right
that
tail.
have
Translated
them
from
manufactured in
Lithuanian.
China.
Yes, he's
Hold on 1 second. I'm going to stop and restart TTS.
Connected to channel Theo.
Because they were letting me know that you were a little bit quiet. I turned you up.
I can also get a little bit closer to my microphone.
Maybe that'll help. All right, we got to back up. And I'm sure they'll tell me if you're a little bit quiet again, but I think we're close for that time. Thank you. Okay. Again, we mentioned that I sent you the questionnaire and you went through and you answered it. So what I'm going to do is I will put this on the show's pages, but what I wanted to ask you, I took a little notes. I went through it and they are amazing. I have so many questions, but if you want to elaborate on something else in here, please stop me.
Of course.
Okay. So the first thing I want to say is when I asked you about who you are and your background, what you said was that you have a constant fight between idealism and pragmatism. What I wanted to preface that with is that everyone is on their different path. So like I'm on a new career. I'm learning, I'm teaching myself stuff every day. Someone else may be just starting their journey somewhere, some other people may be in between. So I don't have a full grasp of just what you mean by when you say idealism and pragmatism. Can you explain that?
Of course. So
Jess says,
on one side, I am
sounds
an
fine to me
idealist.
personally, and I have hearing issues.
Want to do
Spectre
good,
says,
and
He sounded fine, but wasn't
very
the same as Theo.
convinced
and
that
ideally
open
you want
source software is the way
equalized
to
audio
go,
volumes.
and that
Decent now, though.
information should be free, and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then reality kicks in, and I realize, okay, so for example, I only started my new teaching business, MonoSpace Mentor, recently, basically about 1.5 years ago, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm still in the startup phase. And so I thought, I have benefited from open source software so much for decades now, and I've built my whole business based on open source software. So it's time to give back by, for example, teaching. So I thought by myself, I should have a free course offering. I should share my course scripts for free and things like that. And then I start thinking, well, the whole impetus to start this business was to have something that I can do for the next 1 or 2 decades. And so how am I going to make money if I share everything for free? And
Mhm.
so that's one point where I guess I need to be a little bit more pragmatic if my strategy is supposed to work out.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, I really want to be an active and contributing member of the open source community, and so there's always I'm always trying to find a balance between the two. I mean, and the same goes for day-to-day business, of course. I'm very often driven by the word should. I should get this done, and this should be done by tomorrow, and we really shouldn't have this at all. And then I also need to remind myself that my day only has so many hours, and that there are other things than just work.
Mhm.
So as I said, it's a constant rebalancing in this regard.
Yep, it is. I do the same thing. I'm constantly balancing and some days I lose I'm a little out of balance, but I agree with you, and thank you for explaining that a little bit more. So you also shared where you are geographically, and that's amazing. Thank you. I'm in the States, and you've moved around just a little bit, but just an off-the-cuff question: can you name a local food establishment nearby and its signature dish, or if you're just cooking, do you have a specialty?
But Theo, OPSEC.
Raspberry Pi supercomputer says,
I hear ya.
Warning.
I know. That's
So,
what I mean. If you want to say your specialty dish is fine.
No, I'm based in Bray, which is a little bit south of Dublin in Ireland, and there's not much of local specialties I am aware of. But if you come to Bray, I'll probably take you to the Martello Hotel, because they have really great dishes for lunch and dinner.
Okay. Very cool. Thank you. So I loved your answer to age too. You're as old as Unix, which is
I'm basically epoch old. Yes.
All right. A great answer, by the way, too. And can you, based on that life experience that you have, or do you see like any great, or I'm sorry, do you see a great parallel or difference with what you see with IT over the years? Is there something glaringly that's like similar or glaringly like different that have you seen over the years?
Over the whole
Nerdy Biker says,
span of time, I don't think
Okay.
there's
Translated from
much of a
Dutch.
difference. There are always topics
Fix It
that get
says,
hyped that
I've lived
and
in
other
Doom era.
that are declared dead,
Mhm.
and the only thing that changes is which topics these are.
Mhm.
If it's well, BASIC is dead and Pascal is the future, or nowadays some kind of a JavaScript framework or
Right.
a specific Linux distribution.
Mhm.
I think some things never change in our industry.
That's a good answer. Yeah, there's a lot of hot takes. There's a lot of people. Rust is being thrown around a lot now, or Go even as well too. So yeah, that's probably a good similarity that's going on right now is hot takes between framework or software.
Yep.
You talked about you answered the questions about your education level, but you went even deeper and you gave us a snapshot in time. So this is kind of like when you started programming to after you had obtained your degree. You talked about some of these computers, and I want to bring them up real quick so people can see them. So a VIC-20, which I'm not familiar with, so that's going to be interesting. Commodore 128. I had a family member that had a Commodore 64, and all we did was play computer games on it. So I didn't even know it could do anything else. An Amiga and an 8386 PC. So I'm going to look at the VIC-20 real quick on the screen. Okay, so this thing. All right, I remember something like this in, I think it would have been in grade school. And I'm not sure, I can't even remember the monitor that came with it. So this was the first thing you had, and you said when you first booted it up, what had come up?
With the BASIC prompt. It booted right into BASIC. BASIC basically was the operating system of these machines. So the VIC-20 has the same form factor as the C64 after it, and it just had less resources. The VIC-20 had actual 3.5 kilobytes of available RAM, and so all this thing could do was basically start with the basic interpreter, and then you could load stuff either from a cassette tape, which ran on normal audio tapes as a storage medium, or if you were more wealthy, you might have had the floppy disk to connect to it, and then you had faster and more ample storage for that. And so it also came with a great manual, because you basically opened up the manual. It told you how to power this thing up and connect it to your TV. It had an RF modulator that would then be connected to your TV set. And you switched it on, and a few seconds later, you had a prompt there telling you ready with a blinking cursor, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then you could start programming, and the manual took you from your first steps to the whole basic language. It was basically a programming manual more than everything else.
How about that? The underneath the keys, and I'm just noticing this now. What are those symbols?
These are basically graphical characters. You could use them to build some kind of a TUI, a text-based user interface.
Okay.
So you could put frames around your texts and do other things like that.
Okay, cool. I did not know that. It just occurred to me now when I was looking at that thing. I'm familiar with the Commodore one. 64. I imagine it looks similar to the 128. But I wanted to ask you about the or no, were you going to say something about the Commodore 128?
The 128 was basically the evolution of the
Sulfuric
64. It
says-
had C64 built in,
Graphics. Bitmap's another cool
it
stuff back
had
in the day.
more features that oftentimes didn't get used because I guess most people who use the 128 went straight into C64 mode to play games. But for example, you could actually attach a real green screen monitor to it, and that then had 80 columns of text.
Okay.
Back in that time, only the professional machines had that usually, an 80 column, an 80 by 24, I think, screen. So the 128 was quite capable in that way, but I don't think many people used that from the get-go.
Yep. You were mentioning about the tapes on the other one, and looking back, we had one. It was a tape recorder that you connected to the side of the Commodore 64, and looking back, like all the things that we had to do to get this thing to boot was pretty complicated for what we were doing back in the day. It's just amazing when you look back and you think about those things. You had an Amiga. Go ahead.
Just a comment on the PDP 11. The VIC-20 at least had some software running when you switched it on. The PDP 11, this mini computer that cost tens of thousands of dollars in the early 70s, didn't have any software when you switched it on. And that's why it has these many switches on it, because you had to input the bootloader program in machine code manually if you had to switch the machine off and on again. And only then it would be able to read the operating system or some software from a paper tape or something like that. But when you switch this machine on, it came on dead without any software. It couldn't do anything until you actually toggled in a few lines of machine code to make it at least be able to read a paper tape or something.
That's crazy. Again, when you think back, I mean, when you look at how custom computers and how, I mean, a lot of times you just can turn them on and then you're right into a browser and you log into a couple services. It's amazing looking back how complicated they were to just to use and just to get moving, I guess. Yeah. This is the Amiga. This is the next one that you had. Did you have the diskette drive? Those look like.
This is pretty much the setup I had without the external floppy.
Okay.
The Amiga 500 had a little floppy on the right side. You can see the notch on the right side. That's the floppy drive.
Sit there. Yep.
And I had a monitor with it, but that was all I had. I didn't have any additional peripherals.
Okay.
I think no, I didn't even get a printer until I got the PC, I think.
You know what? I want to check real quick. How are you? Okay. Or how are you on time? I'm
completely flexible.
Okay. All right. If we were going to butt up against something, that would be my fault, and I want to make sure we hit the big stuff. All right. So you also talked about all the books that you consumed when you were younger. What did you do with them? Was it just reading and you were able to just absorb it? Were you doing line by line code? Were you reproducing? Were you making your own projects? What were you doing with all that knowledge when you were that young?
I was always so curious, and I think I never stopped doing that.
Full stack live.
And even before I got my first home computer, I scoured the local library and got all the books about computers they had, and many of them were professional books like software engineering practices and things like that. So I don't think I understood half of it, but I was a voracious reader, and I guess some of that at least stuck. So I was able to start developing software in a semi-professional way quite early, and I've always enjoyed programming for 40 years now.
Okay. So you also talked about the projects that you developed. You developed a small payroll program, accounting, and that was to help with your mom's job. You developed.
Yeah, she was working as a kind of a secretary on the side, and she did payroll accounting for a small construction company. And so she had these huge books with basically tax tables. And it took a lot of time to do the payroll runs every month, I guess.
Okay.
Even though the company wasn't that big. And so that was one of my first real projects to basically develop a payroll or tax accounting software for her.
Okay.
For that specific task, it wasn't something that you would have been able to sell, but it did tackle exactly what she had to do, and it definitely helped her get her stuff done more quickly.
Very cool. You did that, and that was it when you were 18.
Some around that time, yeah.
About that time. The database application for managing engine maintenance cycles. how old were you when you did that?
19, I think, shortly after that. So my mom's main job was secretary at a nuclear power plant nearby, near our town. And so she was able to pull a few strings for me to get something like summer jobs during vacation time and things like that. And first I did normal summer job stuff like filing invoices into folders and stuff like that. But over time, it became known that I was into computers and into programming, so I got to do a little bit more programming. Maybe I saw something that the department where I was in at that time was doing, and I sat down and in a few hours hacked something together to simplify that job or something. So I had after finishing high school in Germany, you have normally you have either mandatory military service or you could do social services instead. I did military service, and it was scheduled for 18 months, but during that time it got shortened to 12 months.
Okay.
So when I was dismissed early, I had a little bit of time, a few months' time, until I was able to start college. And so my mother got me another job outside of summer jobs. That was something specifically for me. So I got to spend a few weeks writing a specification for an engine maintenance application.
Okay.
So back then, engine maintenance was still done on paper. You simply crossed off which engine got maintained what, and when they had their check cycles and things like that. And of course, that was pretty tedious and error prone. And then they wanted to computerize that. And so I spent all this time to write the specification for such an application. What are the data formats, the data structures that need to be managed? What features does this application have to have, and things like that. And when it turned out that I had a little bit more time, they said, okay, your specification is great. How about you implement it? And so I went ahead and bought myself a commercial database library that I could link with my application, because now I needed real database management features, more than just writing and reading files. And I implemented that, and that was my first freelance job. They had me do that into my first semester at college.
Wow. Yep, that's pretty amazing. Along the lines of developing projects, because like already, you know, in the first part of your career, your arc here, you're developing projects. Like I'm baiting you a little bit because I say this on stream a lot, and I think you have a similar opinion. But I really think projects, having the knowledge is one thing, but I think projects helping you apply it is critical to your learning. Do you agree with that a little bit, or do you disagree a little bit, or how do you feel about projects with your development?
No, I think projects are mandatory for learning. You need to practice what you learn. You need to apply your learnings, so, for example, if we're talking about system administration or cybersecurity, something like having a home lab, for example, is something everyone who wants to do this professionally should have, where you can actually try things out, try different types of encryption between systems, analyze network traffic between two machines, setting up services that replicate from one machine to another, things like that. That is just a completely different level of learning in my regard.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. So you mentioned that priesthood, you were thinking about doing becoming a Catholic priest at one time. I say that you don't even talk about it anymore, but my the Catholic school that I was going to, the nun there, Sister Sharon, actually, great lady. She approached me too if I wanted to be a priest. No one in chat will believe that. But yeah, I thought that was a funny similarity between our lives there. So
yeah, I got I was baptized Catholic. Nowadays I fell out of the faith. But back then, age 9, I became an altar boy, and I actually stayed with that organization until I was 21. By that time, leading the whole thing, and yeah, that I guess that also gets us back to the idealist side of myself. So the whole Christian message and these things really appealed to me, and so that actually led to me being interested in, again, becoming a professional in that industry, basically. Yeah, but love got in the way, fortunately, from in hindsight, and that's why I actually ended up studying computer science and not theology.
That's interesting insight. Thank you very much for that answer. Especially how, it was. Thank you for that answer. I myself am a practice vulnerability. I mean, I talk to people about. I'll talk to people about anything that they ask me, and thank you for that answer. That was very kind to you. With regard to the system, you mentioned at the end, and I don't want to, I'm not trying to dig up it, but system, the administration business that didn't work out. Is there something there that you learned from that? Because I mean, like, you're CEO, CTO of your own managed business now. Is there something that you've taken from that experience that didn't quite work out?
Yeah, I think the main learning from that was get clear on what your strengths and your weaknesses are. And my weakness is definitely all the back office stuff, all the paperwork, and accounting and these things. So if you're not really into that, my recommendation would be first get an accountant, and when you can afford it, also get someone who does the whole back office stuff and dunning and all these things for you. I didn't, and so I kept spending money that I didn't have. And at one point, the bank came knocking, and I had to actually approach family and get loans and all kinds of stuff to repay my debts, because I simply had, again, the idealist side of me, built my home lab, and bought compilers, commercial compiler software and things like that. And in the end, I didn't have the jobs to show for it, or the commissions from customers and things like that. And yeah, there definitely was a lot of learning involved as well, but I paid dearly for that learning.
Sure. No, and again, thank you very much for the candid, open response to that question. It's I think it's important for people to see that, like, there is, I'll screw 5 things up today. You know what I mean? I've made mistakes in the past too, and you have to learn from them and move on. So again, thank you for that open and honest answer. Okay, so now moving on to like previous jobs, I'm going to bait you again a little bit more, because you said that you went to a conference, at a Linux conference. You met a colleague who's an IT manager, and that led to one of your first like job roles professionally, right? So
I had worked for a short time. I had worked as basically a web developer for 1 or 2 years. That was right after college. It wasn't much to write home for, so I was quite happy to get into something more Linux-based, and so I became a SUSE certified Linux trainer, and that got me traveling a lot to either training centers that were run by SUSE or partners of them, or if it was, say, a training commission for a bigger company, then it would be at company headquarters directly without a training center involved. So I got myself a nice car, again, spending money, maybe, yeah, without much thinking. And so I traveled a lot. And so I was at that local Linux conference, and met a colleague from college, and we talked what we were doing. And so it turned out they were looking for someone who could basically even out skills and knowledge levels across the organization. So of course they had people who were very skilled and really senior in their roles, but also people maybe even on the same team that were far below that. And so she was looking for someone who could basically get everyone to at least an average level of knowledge in terms of system administration, even down to Linux kernel programming. So having a basic understanding of how Linux works behind the scenes in terms of memory management, virtual file systems, things like that. And then databases, relational model, and all these things. So a really broad spectrum of topics, all somehow related to system administration, especially to system administration of a huge infrastructure. The company in question is one of Germany's biggest internet service providers. So they had millions of customers, and running infrastructure for millions of customers, of course, looks a little bit different than simply running a website for just a few visitors. And so it was really important that everyone was on the same page about all these things. Also in terms of, for example, being ready to do on call when you get actually paged out of bed at 4 a.m. in the morning, no team around you, and you need to make decisions. And so that was the goal. And I was all in. That was another challenge, and I'm always driven by challenges. I lost that web development job simply because I wasn't challenged. I got bored, and every time I get bored, I do a shoddy job. And so they simply didn't renew my contract back then. But this time, this was a huge challenge. I got a stack of books about kernel programming and database management on all these things, and distilled them down into a curriculum that I then taught at that organization over the span of about 3 or 4 months.
Wow. How, in regards to teaching those people and all those different skill levels, how did you work with all those different skill levels? Because I imagine you were getting different questions from different people based on their experience. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I guess there are two ways to deal with people who are already at the level you want them to be at the end of the course. You can either ask them to shut up, or you can try and integrate them and make them assistant teachers, basically.
Okay.
And that was, for the most time, the approach I took back then. Just for them not to get bored and to be able to actually demonstrate their knowledge, and maybe also turn it into something that someone who's not on that level can understand.
Okay. I don't know what that just occurred to me. I don't know what answer I was expecting, but that was great. Thank you. So one thing I wanted to touch on, and you could tell as little or as much as you want about this, is the dubious circumstances that caused you to not work there anymore. Yeah.
So the company, I started as a trainer and then was hired to start a new team to run mission critical services. Got acquired after a few years, and I was promoted to a department head, leading 3 teams again with pretty core services. My title was actually head of IT core services. We did the whole database administration. We did backup system administration at a huge scale, and we did online payment services, including the whole PCI DSS dance.
Okay.
And yeah, pretty important stuff. And I think shortly after that, my boss that also switched over together with me basically got shit canned, I think. And we got a new manager who basically came from the same company as our new CTO came from.
Okay.
And we never got along. This really didn't work between the two of us. And I wasn't alone in that, but I was pretty dissatisfied, and I think that was the time when I started thinking about what I could do on my own again. So basically, what's nowadays called quiet quitting. Now, my wife had some health issues at that time, and so we decided to do a vacation at the North Sea, just for its climate. And so we went there for 2 weeks. And then we came back, and I noticed after coming into the door that there was an SMS from a colleague asking me to call him, another department head. And looked at my emails, and there was an email from him as well, asking me to call him. And so I thought, okay, it's 11 p.m., but I guess I should call him before I get back to work tomorrow.
Right.
So I did. He answered the phone, and he told me, well, you might want to sit down. Last Friday, our boss presented your replacement.
Oh my gosh, while you were on vacation. Yeah, that's awful.
So I got myself a lawyer, went back to work, had a few conversations with my boss and someone from HR. And
wow.
A few days later, I left with a few months of garden leave and also a nice severance package because that was completely out of the blue and without any advance warning or something like that. The reasoning my boss brought why he was firing me basically was that I didn't address risks properly. But the option he offered me was to take on another team lead job,
Mm-hmm.
so a demotion basically. Among these team lead jobs, he also offered me a team lead job as risk manager.
So take the demotion, but then also take this risk
Do a risk management job after getting demoted for not addressing risks.
Yes. Okay.
They asked me to stay for another week simply to basically onboard my replacement, who already was on a member of our department. So I agreed to stay on for another week, then realized that person had taken this week off. And so I spent another
into the deep end to learn to swim.
I spent this week basically circling my thumbs.
Yeah, really.
And then I went home and started to build the business that I'm now leading after 13 years.
Interesting. And again, thank you for the story, for the open and honest story. That's almost unbelievable. That's crazy. Okay. So, well, I guess I'm moving into more baiting. So we already talked about projects. I don't think we got to like beat that up anymore. But I guess in regards to projects, like you talked about a few things that may be a little too technical, and I know they were just examples, and they may be too technical for just some people just getting into it. If you could go back and think about some of those first projects that you worked on, is there anything now that's similar that you could say that like someone just getting into it, easing into coding or networking or something that they could look at?
Yeah, definitely. Host your own website.
That manager's gonna bet.
Host your own website.
That's so important from many angles. Because not only does it give you a lot of skills and you learn a lot by things breaking or by breaking things, and you can do whatever you want. So you can add databases, you can add any bells or whistles that you'd like, but also from an indie web perspective, being in control of your own presence on the internet is a good thing. Being able to decide with which ISP you're going to go, with which hosting company you're going to go, things like that. Not being dependent on some kind of corporate overlord to who can basically delete you from the internet on a whim. So there are lots of advantages, and running your own website isn't that hard. But it'll give you a lot of insight into the inner workings of the internet. At some point, you will have to deal with things like HTTP headers. That will also be important if you get into cybersecurity. Things like that, address management, routing, all these things. So that's definitely something that I can recommend, because that's how I started out as well. When I started my first self-hosted website, the hosting provider I chose didn't have a data center or racked servers in there. What they had was basically an office that they had emptied and stuffed full of shelves and put an AC on the wall. And so when I decided to run my own web server, I got a little mini tower PC, 486-33, with Linux on it, put it into the trunk of my car, drove to the ISP, went into their hosting cubicle, put my PC on the shelf, they plugged in the network and power, and off we went. And so that's how I got my first skills in web hosting. And a little bit later, I'm running with my business hundreds of Linux servers and high performance websites that we serve millions of web requests per day. And so it all started with that little 486 mini tower in the back of my car.
And you know what? I'm going to drive that point home if you don't mind. It all started with that computer that you had, that little server you had in the back of your car. It all starts somewhere. And if you are watching or you're listening and you are thinking about doing something or you want to start somewhere, start with a website. But just start. All the projects, or a lot of the projects that I started on, were just like cobbled together pieces of this or that. Some of them still are, but then you change them and you modify them and you make things better and you learn from it. Just start. You can't get to those next steps unless you start. So
yeah, choose a web hosting provider, get a VPS somewhere, and install the web server of your choice, and get going and make your own experiences.
Very cool. We talked a little bit about network because of the conference, but how important do you think networking is? LinkedIn, Discord, in person, face to face. Is one more important than the other? Is doing some of them? What are your thoughts on those?
Networking is such a loaded word. Sometimes it just means you have to mingle with people at some networking event where you exchange business cards and basically waste your time and anyone else's too. Of course, there are also better opportunities. I think there's a much better term, and that's relationships. Building relationships will always be part of a professional career. Relationships with your team, with your boss, with your customers, but also relationships with other industry professionals who might get you onto their stream and interview you. Relationships with your community on your own Discord server, things like that, I think are really, really valuable. I think you can't actually put a value on them because you never know what happens. Someone might be able to open a door for you or recommend you somewhere where you would have never had any opportunity to get there yourself. And so I don't really like that image of the lone IT guy sitting in their basement and hacking away, because those people usually don't have much success. It's success is more often than not built on relationships, and if you, for example, become a manager, then all the more. You need to have some kind of relationship with the people you work with, otherwise you won't succeed as a manager either. And so that's something that everyone can actually practice by being part of a community, by being a contributor to an open source project, by being active in a Discord server, things like that. That doesn't require much, even for people like me. I'm really introvert. After socializing, I need hours or maybe even a day to recharge my batteries. But it's definitely worth it because these relationships is, I think, what success is built upon. It's actually the core of the business model of my company. We don't do things much differently from our competition. We run Nginx servers, Apache servers. Since we are specialized in running Drupal and WordPress, we run PHP. That's all the same as every other hosting provider as
Just
well.
choose your
The thing
moderator as
is,
well.
we tend to foster relationships with our customers. Even though that limits our growth, our growth rate at least, because it's so hands-on, we have loyal customers. We have customers today that started with us more than 10 years ago.
Wow.
And you can't tell me that they didn't see any other offer that was cheaper than us or maybe more modern than us or something like that. But I think loyalty is not about staying with you blindly, but staying with you even though there are cheaper offers, there are other alternatives that might seem more enticing, and people still stay with you for other reasons. And for us, that reason is relationships. We share Slack channels with our customers. We don't hide behind a ticket system or something like that. We act basically as the external IT team for our customers. And on the other hand, I actually also terminated contracts because we didn't get along with the customer. We didn't get to that relationship.
Wow.
And I went and told them, we tried for a long time and it never really worked out, did it? We always get into arguments on tickets, and you don't seem happy with us. So I think it's best if you simply look for someone else. And maybe I even recommended someone to them and said, maybe you'll be more happy with them than with us. But this is not a working relationship. And so I actually actively canceled contracts with customers.
Wow. Yeah. That can't be that can't be good conversations, but I agree 110% with you about relationships. I'm glad you said that about building relationships, because I'll use networking. I'll say that a lot. But the phrase of building relationships is far more important than networking, because I'll tell people, engage with content, engage with people on LinkedIn or be in a community, contribute to a GitHub, but it's more about the just like liking posts, or it's more than just the obligatory social media response. It's genuinely engaging, respectfully questioning, understanding other people's point of view, or talking to them and getting to know them and building relationships. So I agree with you. Thank you for that phrase. Along that too, what can we talk about, because you also answered the question about the importance of stepping out of your comfort zone. I struggled with this for a long part of my life. I don't like to be uncomfortable. I don't think anyone really likes to be uncomfortable, but it's essential to your learning. It's essential to your growth. You answered the question, but is there anything else you want to say about that, about being outside your comfort zone and learning, growing?
I think stepping outside the comfort zone doesn't have to be that big of a deal. It just means that you basically kick your ass a little bit, and your own ass a little bit, and do something that gives you resistance. There's a great book called The War of Art, not to be confused with the other old Chinese book. And I think the author's name is Jason Pressfield, and he talks about resistance. And resistance is what keeps you from being more successful and from actually reaching your goals. And so that's basically the same thing as getting outside of your comfort zone, basically just getting over that resistance that, for example, kept me from starting my stream. Sometimes I sat in front of a fully loaded OBS and everything was running, and all I had to do press stream, and I didn't. I was afraid, what if nobody visits the stream and I'm talking to myself? What if I screw up? I didn't think of a topic in advance. What am I even going to do today? All these things, and it's that resistance that needs to be conquered. And I mean, you might share the same experience.
Absolutely, I do.
Often when I overcame this resistance and actually did start my stream and started doing something, people popped in, we had a great chat, I got stuff done, and I ended the stream really happy and satisfied and told myself, you would have been such an idiot if you hadn't pressed stream today. And so I think that's the main thing about getting outside your comfort zone. It doesn't mean do stuff that you can't do or that you are certain to fail. It just means overcome this resistance and make new experiences and experience yourself being successful in stuff that you are doing for the first time or that you were not even aware that you could do.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I absolutely have struggled with that. The first few months, it was just me and maybe one other person, and I think I was doing Bandit over the wire Bandit, which is a small CTF. Learning Python, but I've met all kinds of great people. I've met you. I mean, I've met all kinds of great people just streaming. But then also there's and again, this is what I'm talking about, being outside your comfort zone. Like it's a very vulnerable thing to sit in front of a camera for one or two people and or 30 or thousands, and you're working on stuff. I'm working on stuff. I'm not sure if you I'm not sure if you watched me it was just over a year ago. It was like November. I built my first server. I did it all on stream. I had to get NIC cards. I had to get a new NIC card for it. I had to get drives for it. I spent probably, and this is the embarrassing part and the vulnerable part, 2 hours, because my server didn't recognize or wasn't picking up the drives. And I'm looking. I didn't have power plugged into them.
Yep, can relate.
Exegete says.
Great people and a bunch of trolls.
But if you don't,
Need to lol.
if you don't, even if no one's watching, if you're not growing and doing these things, what are you doing? Moving on to the next one, I asked you what your employer's expectations were. I didn't mean to insult you, but the employee that you were that you're not your own boss, but what? Yeah, can you talk about your key expectations, because those are great as well.
People often ask me what they should focus on to say get a junior role somewhere or something. And what I tell them is what I would expect from someone I was about to hire as well. And that is be curious. IT is such a huge spectrum today that can be maintaining all the printers in your company. If you are working at a huge pharma company or something like that, they might have dedicated printer administrators.
Right.
But it also can mean developing web applications or running the infrastructure at Amazon or something like that. So I don't think you can easily bring all the skills that your new employer is going to need. Maybe except if you just switch from your own company to the competition who does the exact same stuff, then you might actually fit in very well. But other than that, you'll always have to learn on the job. You'll have to get new skills. Maybe your previous company ran Apache as a web server and your new company is going to run Nginx or something like that. So you need to familiarize yourself with that. So employers can't expect everyone to bring everything to the table that they are going to need in their future role. But what they can expect is someone to be able to pick things up quite quickly and within a reasonable time at least, and become proficient in what they need to do within, say, the first few months on the job.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think I value being able to learn much higher than bringing a huge body of experience and skills that might not even be necessary for the job. Of course, they might have taught the person something that they then can, on an abstract level, that they can then apply in practice on in their new role. But yeah, I think curiosity and being able to pick up new stuff, even if you think you have learned already a lot, really is something that I can't do without as an employer. And then I guess we'll get back to relationships. You need to be able to work within a team, especially since, for example, my company was remote first from the get-go. I told myself, we are going to run servers in some distant data center anyway, and I don't see why we would have to have a central office where everyone would have to commute to every day just to sit in front of a computer that's connected to an internet connection. We can have that already at home. So back in 2010, when I started the company, it was already designed as a remote-first company, or remote-only company, actually. And you need to be able to work with your team and that's even more important in a remote setting where people can't just pick up what you just did, or where you can quickly tell people over lunch what you just did. You need to write that down. You need to document stuff. You need to know when to ask other people. Maybe if it's okay to do something. I'm about to reboot this machine. Is that okay, or is someone working on that at the moment? Or there are two options that I can choose from while I'm developing this application. What do you think? Which option would be better for us in the future? Things like that. Being able to harness the strengths within your team is something that I really value highly as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I asked you about hours too, and again, that was because I've been talking to people that aren't running their own company. But can you speak a little bit to like work-life balance? You already talked about that a little bit, but how how do you strike that? I guess do you how do you talk to do your employees to tell you about what they require, what they need? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Over time, I had to realize that burnout is real, and even though as a business owner, I was always in control of my own schedule, of course, I tended to overwork myself, and sometimes out of necessity, because something was some system was burning, and we needed to do something about that, even if it took us 24 hours on end. But sometimes I just wanted to get things done and get out of the door, and so I worked myself to the brink or beyond of burnout. And so nowadays I'm much more aware of not overdoing things, and I think doing less something allows you to do more in terms of quality and things like that. So I try to aim at something like a 35-hour week, maybe 40, but not go beyond that. Usually, in the business we are in, where we have to do on-call stuff and manage incidents, sometimes you have to put in a lot more hours, but that should be a rare occasion. And also, there should be recovery time after that. So, for example, if I had to get up at night to take care of something, then I get to sleep in, or not even work on that day. So I get the day off or something like that. And I would do that, of course. That applies to everyone on the team. And Yeah, I guess health, as well as so physical health and mental health, still are under talked
Mm-hmm.
about in our industry, but at least it gets talked about. It's not that much of a stigma anymore to say, okay, I had burnout, or for example, last fall, I actually started getting therapy, simply to have someone who I can talk about my struggles
Mm-hmm.
to get a balance into my schedule. Again, the idealist. I want to do everything. I want to run a great business. With MonoSpace Mentor, I also want to launch another great business. But I'm also husband and father, so I want to have a great family.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that Steam Deck I bought, and I want to have some game time as well.
Of course.
Someone told me I need to sleep as well, so that takes time as well. So,
So,
juggling all these plates and meeting all these self-imposed goals, I guess, is a challenge. And I decided, well, our customers come to us because they want professional help with their hosting. Why don't I get professional help with getting my life in order? And that I did, and it helped me greatly. Having someone to talk things through was such a tremendous help, and did get me on a better trajectory. It's still work in progress, but I'm really happy how far I've come so far.
Good. That's again amazing. Thank you very much for the open, honest answer. And I think everyone does. I know I do too. I struggle with eating habits. I struggle with exercise. I struggle with some of my studies too, and having someone to talk to about those things, and when whatever that looks like is important. Definitely, I agree with you there too. And this is about the last question. Unless you have something for me too. You mentioned, I asked you what advice you wish you had when you'd started on your path, and you said do one thing at a time and do it right. So when I read that, I can literally like barely count on one hand like how many things that I'm trying to juggle. So is it a juggling thing that you're talking about, or is it like when I'm focusing on one of the 5 things I'm focusing on, which is not a good sentence? Like can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I guess it's just about focus. Don't try and multitask, because that's
There's no such thing.
Almost impossible. But dedicate a specific amount of time to a specific topic at a time. So what I've started last year and will continue doing this year is time boxing, where I say, okay, it's similar to what you do with your whole calendar, where you have specific times that you use for learning and streaming, specific times that are reserved for family, specific times that are professional work, all these things. And when you are in one of these slots, focus on the topic at hand, and don't think about what's coming next.
Right.
And just do the one thing and do that right. And when the bell rings, then switch, and then you're the family man or something like that. Don't try to do everything at the same time. That's something that I still don't get 100% right, but yeah, it's definitely a work in progress.
Yeah, it's definitely something to strive towards, definitely.
Another recommendation that I only thought about or thought of after submitting my answers was be really careful when you hire friends.
Oh.
I did that in the past, simply because someone was looking for a job and I was looking for a hire. So I tried to make that work. But it comes with so many complications that nowadays I would be really, really reluctant to mix friendship and work, because it's all the harder to criticize people. It'll be a strain on your personal relationship, even though it might be perfectly valid professional critique.
Mm-hmm.
And if something happens like it happened to me when one of our biggest customers canceled their contract, and we were actually not able to meet our budget anymore. So we had actually to let go of people. And one of them happened to be one of my friends that I had hired 2 years earlier. And yeah, so that was just twice as hard to tell them we simply can't meet payroll anymore, and so we have to terminate your contract. I'm terribly sorry, but there's no way we could continue your contract without putting the whole business in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a really tough time on everyone, and that could be easily avoided if your business relationships are a little bit more separate from your personal relationships.
Okay. Yeah. Again, thank you for that open and honest answer. I can't imagine. I can't imagine having disagreements with friends about which football team is superior is hard enough. I can only imagine. So your friend, you working for someone, your friend working for you, and haven't had that conversation. So thank you again for that. I don't have any other questions. I tried to think a couple more, but I wanted to thank you, Joan. Thank you very much for coming on. This is going to be on USBR Guest. I'll have it on the Twitch as a highlight, and I'll put it on YouTube. We'll include your answers. Thank you so very much for your time and your open and honest answers. I've even leaned on you and asked you for help for we were troubleshooting my VPS as well. So thank you very much.
I had a blast. Thank you for having me.
Sure. All right.